Gentlewoman from Richmond City, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise for a point of personal privilege and a motion.
Gentlewoman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, 50 years ago this month, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and local African American activists and civic organizations in a voting rights campaign in Selma, Alabama, which has been depicted in the recent movie Selma. They chose Selma because in spite of repeated registrations by attempts by local blacks, only 2% were on the voting rolls. They chose Selma because they anticipated the notorious brutality of local law enforcement under Sheriff Jim Clark would attract national attention and pressure President Lyndon Johnson and Congress to enact new national voting rights legislation. This campaign began with mass arrests but little violence. That all changed by February. Police attacks against nonviolent demonstrators increased that month, including the shooting death of 26-year-old church deacon Jimmy Lee Jackson as he tried to protect his mother from a state trooper's nightstick. The beating death by several local whites of a white Unitarian minister, James Reed, who had come from Massachusetts to join in the protest. And most notoriously, on March 7th, Bloody Sunday, when activists marching from Selma to the state capitol in Montgomery were beaten and tear-gassed by state troopers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. On March 25th, 1965, after a 5-day march from Selma to Montgomery, Dr. King addressed the crowd and the nation in words that still resonate today. He said, "Let us therefore continue our triumphant march to the realization of the American dream. Let us march on segregated housing until every ghetto or social and economic depression dissolves, and Negroes and whites live side by side in decent, safe, and sanitary housing. Let us march on segregated schools until every vestige of segregated and inferior education becomes a thing of the past, and Negroes and whites study side by side in the social healing context of the classroom. Let us march on poverty until no American has to skip a meal so that their children may eat. March on poverty until no starved man walks the streets of our cities and towns in search of jobs that do not exist. Let us march on poverty until wrinkled stomachs in Mississippi are filled and the idle industries of Appalachia are realized and revitalized, and broken lives and sweltering ghettos are mended and remolded. Let us march on ballot boxes. March on ballot boxes until race baiters disappear from the political arena. Let us march on ballot boxes until the salient misdeeds of bloodthirsty mobs will be transformed into the calculated good deeds of orderly citizens. Let us march on ballot boxes until the Wallaces of our nation tremble away in silence. Let us march on ballot boxes until we send to our city councils, state legislatures, and the United States Congress men who will not fear to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with God. Let us march on ballot boxes until brotherhood becomes more than a meaningless word and an opening prayer, but the order of the day on every legislative agenda. Let us march on ballot boxes until all over Alabama, God's children will be able to walk the earth in decency and honor. Mr. Speaker, that march is not done. We still have much to do. Just today in the Education Committee, we heard a report from the School Board Association about the disparities between African American and white children in our schools today. While the underemployment rate fell under 12% in 2014, the unemployment rate for African American workers was 20.5% and 18.4% for Hispanic workers, compared to 11.8% for white. For the first time in 50 years, a majority of public school students across the country are considered low income, many of them people of color. The poverty rate for all African Americans in 2012 was 28.1%. Black families with children under 18 headed by a single mother have the highest poverty rate at 47.5% compared to only 8.4% of married couple Black families. I could give you more and more statistics. And I think the recent events of Ferguson and New York City and the vitriolic and yes, sometimes racist comments that we've seen in response on social media, commentary, and even in some of our own neighborhoods stir up memories of Selma and Birmingham for African Americans today, and a commitment not only to protect the gains we've made, but to continue the work Dr. King began. As we have witnessed the Black Lives Matter protests across the country, I've heard a question asked, just as it was in Alabama in 1965. When will we return to normalcy? Well, Dr. King had an answer for that, and it still holds true today. It was normalcy in Maryland and Marion that led to the brutal murder of Jimmy Lee Jackson. It was normalcy in Birmingham that led to the murder on Sunday morning of 4 beautiful, unoffending, innocent girls. It was normalcy on Highway 80 that led state troopers to use tear gas and horses, billy clubs against unarmed human beings who were simply marching for justice. It was normalcy by a cafe in Selma, Alabama that led to the brutal beating of Reverend James Reed. It is normalcy all over our country, which leaves the Negro perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. It is normalcy all over Alabama that prevents the Negro from becoming a registered voter. The only normalcy we will settle for is the normalcy that recognizes the dignity and worth of all God's children. The only normalcy that we will settle for is the normalcy that allows judgment to run down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. The only normalcy that we will settle for is the normalcy of brotherhood, the normalcy of true peace, the normalcy of justice. Then Dr. King asked another question we still hear today. How long will it take? And he said, not long. However difficult the moment, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed to earth will rise again. How long? Not long, because no lie can live forever. How long? Not long, because you reap what you sow. How long? Not long, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But Mr. Speaker, it's been 50 years, and the work is still not done. Let us recommit ourselves to take that march to its conclusion soon. And so, Mr. Speaker, as we celebrate the life and legacy of Dr. King today, I move that when the House adjourn, it do so in the honor and memory of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
The gentlewoman from Richmond City, Ms. McClellan, moves that when the House adjourn today, it adjourn in the honor and memory of Dr. Martin Luther King. As many as favor that motion will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion is agreed to.